And again, we keep doing these sanctions after sanctions after sanctions. And we talked about this when you were on the show several months ago. Are these sanctions with Russia and forcing Europe to buy more expensive American oil and natural gas to block off China, is that going to backfire on America? And it seems like it's starting to. And now we're adding all of these sanctions that, like you say, against China, which are going to hurt these big corporations. Nike and the like is like, wait a minute. And if you hurt their bottom dollar, guess what? They're gonna get someone in the White House. They're gonna figure this out. They're gonna, it's the United Corporations of America. So, Nike might have to figure out how to navigate the fact that Raytheon, is the Secretary of Defense. Austin is. I mean, he was on the Raytheon board of directors. So it's like those companies, the military industrial complex. I'm just asking questions. I don't know. I don't know who has the answers to them, but like, is this set up some sort of corporate battle between Nike and Raytheon? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, we have such a preposterous landscape that's been created here in the United States that now we're forcing people into world, we're I don't think people realize we're on like the brink of World War III here, and not to mention the United States itself is in the early stages of a civil war. If you look at any sort of civil war timeline, this is the early stages of one. And oh, by the way, we're facing extinction from climate collapse. Like the UK today is the hottest place in the world. England, like this is, and America just keeps doubling down on this. Like we talked about this last time, and since it's unfolded even more. I mean, how do you see all these sanctions playing out in terms of the U.S.? They already started to leak a little story about Biden might not finish his first term, which I knew he would never finish his first term. There's no way. Like his cognitive decline in the primaries, I was like, this guy, if they put this puppet in there, they're gonna just so they can get Buttigieg or some other warmongering psycho that just can wave a diversity flag or whatever. But like, how do you see this playing out?
Well, I mean, the entire U.S. sanctions regime is so expansive, but the areas where it's having the most negative impact is, of course, with Russia and China. And what the United States has done in order to soften the blow, or in my opinion, just to delay the blow, is to really tank Europe first, right? So what's happening with Europe is that the United States has forced Europe into the most draconian sanctions possible against Russia, which only hurts European countries, hurts the entire EU right now, is in disarray. We've seen the political chaos, right, unfolding in the United Kingdom, unfolding in France, unfolding in Italy. I mean, there is a political chaos just across the Eurozone. And a lot of that has to do with what is happening and already known, or is already known to going to happen, which is the euro is in trouble. The euro is now at parity with the US dollar, which is really bad news for the EU. Because what that means is the United States dollar imperialism has succeeded in weakening the euro to the point where it is going to not be competitive with its dollar counterpart. And that's already sending shockwaves. And it's already sending shockwaves in a time where the price of gas and the price of oil is sky high. And that's because of the sanctions. So Russia has, all countries that are oil exporters are raising the price of oil. All corporations that do the selling of oil, raising the price of oil because of the risks that these sanctions have caused and all of the instability that they've caused. So the fallout is that Europe is going to be hit with an economic crisis far sooner than even the United States. But the United States, Joe Biden administration, not the smartest people. I mean, they know what they're doing. They definitely have an agenda, and that agenda is definitely playing out in term with Europe. But it's not the smartest move, because Europe is so central to what the United States does economically that anything bad that happens to Europe, similarly to anything bad that happens to the United States economically, is going to blow back on each side. So the United States is really only buying time. We know the interest rates are going up. The Fed is going to raise them, and then eventually cause a recession, an economic crisis. And that's really bad news for basically everyone, except for the big investors, the Wall Street, the military contractors. They don't get affected by it. Actually, they're looking for the payout afterward, and then they can just quote unquote like reset. They can just reset and then go about their business after huge bailouts and then do the whole thing over again. So the sanctions on Russia and then on China too, because there are two areas where the United States sanctions China, and we might not consider it sanctions, but the United States is still engaged in a so-called trade war with huge tariffs on Chinese goods. So, farmers, anyone who wants to export to China, anyone who wants to do business with China right now is facing pretty heavy tariffs to do so, and that's hurting U.S. businesses. That's really just hurting the United States. But it's still happening, and there hasn't been anyone. Catherine Tai, the trade representative of the United States, she's not doing it. They're not doing anything about that. So there's still a Trump trade war on China, and then of course you have the sanctions on China's big tech industry. It's high technology like 5G, 6G in the works. On Huawei, there's a whole blacklist of Chinese high tech corporations that are on this blacklist, and that is just excluding the United States from any possibility of developing that kind of technology, because we have telecoms here. They don't want to develop the industry. They don't want to, because it costs too much money. They just want to take our money. They want to just up the prices of the goods that they already sell. They don't want to produce anything different. So China's tech industry has been sanctioned. And then, of course, with the human rights, as I said before, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, that is creating, and you kind of mentioned it, kind of a conflict. There is. The Wall Street Journal published not too long ago, I believe this was in the last 2 weeks, they published an open letter by a lot of big businesses that were like business representatives, right? The CEOs and other types, so-called scholars and economists. And they were like, you got to cool it with this China stuff because it's really hurting us. So we should kind of go back a little bit to the point where we actually consider China an important economic partner, because we have hundreds of billions of dollars there. We have hundreds of billions of dollars worth of investments and trade. So we might not want to wage war against that country. So there is this conflict that's happening, and I think it is a conflict between those who produce goods, right? These big monopolies that actually produce goods, and those who produce weapons, and those who produce money, finance. That's the conflict, right, between those forces.
It's such an interesting thing because, you're really seeing how the complete out of control military industrial complex, like just insane out of control. Like they're already talking about Congress is about to give Joe Biden over $800 billion budget. Like $60 billion for Ukraine. I mean, regular people can't get their SBA and PPP loans forgiven. You can't get student debt forgiveness, but man, we got money for these never ending wars. And obviously the military industrial complex loves it because they've just been on this $10-20 trillion gravy train for the last 20 years. But China, I mean, all this saber rattling against China, all these big corporations all have factories in China. Apple, Nike, everything. Find me a product anywhere in anyone's home who's watching this where 90% of the stuff isn't made in China. Like, so, and the Chinese government, when everyone's like, oh, they're going to attack us. Why would China, and I've said this before, why would it invade 330 million of its best customers? Why would it do that? So the American State Department, the war machine, has so painted the whole country and as you say, rightfully so, Europe, which is a big section of the global economy because there's just a lot of money in that little continent. They're like, I mean, look at Europe. They're dependent upon cheap Russian oil. They're dependent upon Chinese labor for their products. America, and we said it before last time you were on the show, and they're just doubling down on this. They're really isolating themselves. And I bet you in that, like, you know, when this recent Middle East visit that Biden was like, China, China, China. And I get the feeling like a lot of these countries like Saudi Arabia and stuff are like, and they're just waiting for America to go under, and they're ready to do business with China. And China, as we've talked about the Silk Road Initiative, they haven't been bombing the shit out of people. They've been building them ports and soccer stadiums and whatever else. And you could argue, well, some of them, you know, they have all these strings attached, or they're just going to pull their money out the minute they don't get their way. Okay. But you're not getting bombed. I mean, and China has literally been slow. They're playing the long game of America is going under, and you see the money printing, the inflation that we're in. And as you said, like by doing these sanctions, they create more supply chain issues, which in turn creates more inflation. We're in the beginning of a recession. The Fed is hiking rates. July 28th is when they do the GDP, like they summarize what the first 2 quarters of the GDP are. And we're going to show 2 quarters of GDP decline and over 5% inflation. Those 2 indications are like, based on their central bank, Wall Street, Federal Reserve system, those are the indicators that say we are in a recession. And then they're going to announce it. And when they announce it, then it's a lot of these big corporations. I've done videos on it showing how they're ready. They kind of want this recession because some will get hurt, but a lot of big corporations will do fine, because look at the Great Resignation. Everybody didn't want to go to work. Plus, we also have 1 million people that are dead, many of whom were workers that now are not working because they're dead from COVID. So these corporate, and we all saw it last year, like Chipotle and Target offering 18, 20 some bucks an hour because they couldn't find employees. Well, when they announce the recessions here, they're going to gladly say, oh, we're laying people off. And so now they're not going to offer you 20 bucks an hour to work at Chipotle. They're going to take you back down to the $10 an hour, whatever the minimum wage is there. And, you know, we'll see like, oh, you want to have your union labor strike? Well, we might lay a bunch of people off. Like, you'll be less likely to do that. And they've also been liquidating. One of the reasons the stock market and the crypto markets are down, the big corporations, the hedge funds and everything, they've been liquidating and holding on to cash because they know cash is king in a recession. When companies are going belly up, when homes are facing foreclosure and short sale, that's what they did in the last housing crisis. They came through and they bought up. You know, you're facing foreclosure, you and your wife and your kid. You're like, uh-oh, they'll come in. We'll pay you this money. They did it to me. I lost my condo. That they're waiting for this. But you can't keep doing this Ponzi scheme. And because China and Russia and Pakistan are, even maybe India now and Saudi Arabia, I bet you they're all kind of quietly going, well, when America goes under, we'll we'll slide in. And so I just, it's like you say, it's the Biden administration is not smart at all. And neither really was the Trump administration, because both of these parties are horrible. And they're just it's the problem of America. It's just this toxic capitalism is always just go for the short-term buck, get the quick profit, get the stock with no longevity, anything. And China, just culturally, you know this, they're sitting there planning stuff out for 100 years from now. I mean, like, so yeah. It's really, and they're positioning themselves, even with the digital yuan, of like, you know, crypto's coming. They try to sort of stifle Bitcoin and get rid of Bitcoin miners and stuff like that, because they see that could potentially be a threat as well. I mean, Bitcoin is a threat to all central banks, but this really, like, America is pouring gasoline on the fire of its own demise, and it doesn't realize that it is, or as Mark said, it's just capitalism is eventually just going to eat itself, which is what we're doing.